Los Angeles County is probably built on, I think, 50 or 70 old oil fields. A way to access where these oil fields are is to go into Google and just type in DOGGR. That will take you into the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources, which is part of the State Department of Conservation. And in there will be maps, production, withdrawal data, all kinds of information on where exactly these oil fields are. The maps are a little hard to read, but if you have a road atlas and you're patient, you'll know where these oil wells are. The important thing to realize is that just because you take the gas out of an oil field and you take out maybe 30% of the oil, it goes into low production, they start sealing up the wells. The wells repressurize themselves. The oil that's left makes more gas. The field repressurizes up to maybe 1,700, 2,200 pounds per square inch. And they typically leave a few wells open to siphon off this gas because they can't get the wells to seal up as good as when they were new, before they started drilling holes in the ground. But sometimes they'll use these wells as injection wells. They'll have maybe 200 wells in a formation. They'll start feeding gas back in, or they'll feed in water at high pressure to try and get secondary recovery out of other wells. So if you happen to be sitting in a house built on top of or next to an old oil well that was abandoned in the 40s or 50s to standards that are a lot lower than what we have now, the wells quite often start leaking into the neighborhood, or they're doing fracking now, cracking the geology, and the gas can just run up the old well bores on the outside, get into a different layer of geology that's more permeable, and this gas can run for miles. And these oil field constituents can run for miles. A lot of this gas has got things in it that are known to the state of California, Prop 65 warning, to cause cancer and brain damage. This is the same gas that we pipe into our houses that we cook on. One of the real health issues we see now is people are burning oil field gas in their house that's full of toxic chemicals to cook on and to heat their homes. And one of the comparisons I always like to give is you have a gas stove. It's about 85% methane in the gas stream. There's benzene, toluene, things that cause cancer in it. There's mercaptans, the things that give gas the odor that is way more toxic than any of the other oil field constituents. It forms a very clean blue flame, and then we put a cold pot on top of it. Quench the flame and put uncombusted hydrocarbons into our environment without even thinking to open the window half the time. We run pilot lights that put out toxic vapors and seal up all our doors and windows and go to sleep in this environment. It's a recipe for disaster. So as a background, it's a little bit of the background of the environmental thing about why you don't want to be around leaking oil wells. One of the things I say to people is, well, would you like to live next to the La Brea tar pits? There's apartments there. You know there's oil flowing to the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Belmont, the way they knew, the Belmont Learning Center that was shut down, the most expensive high school project built in the city of LA, the way they knew to drill for oil there in the 1920s, the oil was flowing to the surface naturally because the oil field, the reservoir, was only 700 feet below the surface. And when it rained, the rainwater would push the oil to the surface. So anyway, okay, I digressed far enough. Back to Marina del Rey. So now it's time to open up Marina del Rey.
Oh, you're just talking about that they had cut off a lot of these wells with the bulldozers.
They did not use proper abandonment procedures when they abandoned these wells. They just basically would cut 20 feet, 30 feet off the top of an old well casing, maybe throw a little concrete in, weld a plate over. The contractor that was out there running around with his dozers doing the grading almost walked off the job because he kept running over these huge pipes, hurting his equipment. What have you gotten us into? What's going on? all the officials looked the other way, and they just kept building Marina del Rey. Many of the buildings in Marina del Rey are sitting on top of old leaking oil wells, and there are old oil wells that are just simply leaking through the marina. And we have captured the gas coming up through the water in mason jars, sealed them up, sent them off for isotopic analysis, and it is thermogenic gas. There's two types of gases we look at. There's biogenic gas, which is basically trash rotting, and then there's thermogenic gas, which takes millions of years to cook up and make 100 or so different toxic chemicals, many of which are toxic, that come out of an oil field. So what the officials try and do is say that it's biogenic when it's got things like benzene in it, which there's no way that it can be biogenic. It's thermogenic. It's out of an oil field. Now, the way the scam runs in LA, very important, is the oil companies that own the mineral rights exercise the mineral rights below 500 feet. The property owners own the land, and they own their mineral rights down 500 feet from the surface. So when the oil companies are not exercising proper control over the mineral rights, and these fugitive gases start leaking to the surface and polluting the air and polluting the land on the near surface property rights of the property owners, these are trespassing gases. And the oil companies are absolutely responsible by law for gaining control of this resource and keeping it where it is, because it's their activities that have led it to the surface. But what the city and county of Los Angeles have done is they have imposed what they call methane ordinances. These methane ordinances are geared to say that this is not thermogenic gas, even though we know it is. It's biogenic, and it comes from rotting trash or dead sea creatures from a few hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago, whatever. And the property owner has to take responsibility to protect the structure by putting in a methane system to keep these gases from getting into the building and blowing up the building.
So they've made the property owner the legal responsibility and let the oil companies off the hook for this, basically.
Absolutely.
Are these oil companies ones that are still in existence as legal entities? Or
somebody still owns the mineral rights,
Okay.
but the oil companies have escaped the liability of polluting the surface rights of the property owners and have figured out a way to transfer the responsibility to the near surface property rights. Another extreme example of this and how much the oil companies get away with could be found in a very underprivileged neighborhood where Veneco is operating 12 oil wells underneath the Beverly Hills High School. Now, in this area, there's about 12 or 14 oil wells underneath Beverly Hills High School. So Beverly Hills High School receives from Veneco about $400,000 a year to pump oil out from underneath the school. For a long time, they had no market for the gas stream. They were producing gas and oil. Now, in every third world country, when they have raw gas, they flare it. They just send it out the top of the wellbore and there's a big flame. So they went to the AQMD, the Air Quality Management District, a division of California EPA, and they said, you're not going to flare gas in the middle of Beverly Hills. So they said, okay. So they just released the gas without burning it. The problem was that this field had a lot of benzene in it. So the methane's lighter than air, it floats out. The benzene's heavier than air, it sinks down onto the playground where the kids are playing. Now, benzene causes bone cancer. One of the big ones is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So now we got kids 5-10 years, they're 5 to 10 year latency period. They're out of school, they're at the oncologist, they've got bone cancer, they're going to die. And they're talking to each other and they're saying, I remember you from Beverly Hills High School. And the next thing you know, we got 400 kids with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 5 to 10 years out of school, where the incident rate of this disease in the public is 1 in 150,000. So in 10 years of students graduating, if they're graduating 1,000 a year, say they graduate 10,000 students in 10 years, you would expect a 1 in 15 chance of seeing a disease like that. We have 400 cases that we know of. So what is that? That's an incidence of about 6,000% above normal. So they were using Aaron Brockovich. I did a little bit of the research, not much. They were using a very good toxic tort firm out of Texas. And the judge put a standard of proof in front of them that they could never meet. And then the case fell apart. And basically the city of LA, Beverly Hills High School, and Veneco were able to slide out of the lawsuit and kill 400 children. Now, today they have stopped venting the raw gas out of the top, and instead they're using the gas to run large generators, gasoline engines, gas engines, to produce electricity to feed back into the grid. But the thing they're still doing is when they pump the oil out of the field, they put it in a big slop pit, about 40 feet across, with a grate over it. And there it sits until the oil trucks come and pick up the trucks full of oil. While it sits in this pit, the lighter volatile organic compounds like benzene and toluene, ethane, flash off, and they allow these to just flash off into the air. And this is about 20 feet from the playground at Beverly Hills High School. The big gas engines that are running do not have any of the pollution controls that a modern gasoline engine in a car has. So they're continuing to kill the children in Beverly Hills High School.
Wow. Now, just to digress on this 1 second, wasn't there something I just read? There was a big controversy of the Exposition Line, or one of the lines, and they were going to go right through Beverly Hills High School and run to Santa
like a
Monica.
Subway?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the problem with the subway. Same thing.
But I mean,
The subway.
maybe they were doing that to get the school out of the way so that they could.
The problem with the problem they're having with the subway is that they are in these methane zones.
Yeah.
And basically, they want to take a subway, much of it's going to be underground, and run it through oil fields and run it through geology that's been compromised that contains a lot of gas. Now, the methane's not too much of a problem because it's lighter than air and it floats away. But there are many fractionations of the oil field gas that are heavier than air that are going to collect in the subways. And all it takes is a good spark of a subway car going by, and we're off to the races. It's going to blow up. The subway is going to blow up. There was a case that my friend Dr. Endres worked in Mexico City where a gas line was running through a town in Mexico, and they had placed the gas line too close to another line, and the metals were dissimilar. So in the wet formation, it formed a bit of a battery, and then it leaked through. And they started dumping raw gasoline into the storm drains in this little town in Mexico. And once one of them went off, the whole city, street by street, started blowing up. So, I mean, you're dealing with, some pretty dangerous stuff sometimes.
Well, Farmers Market, 10 years ago, they had an explosion that killed some people over there.
Well, actually, that was a Ross Dress for Less store that blew up. And what that was there was a, I forgot the name of the well, but they had slant drilled a well and into the formation. I think it was the Salt Lake oil field, if I don't miss my guess, and it leaked, and it was a high water table, and the well started leaking gas, and it got into the geology. And when a lady went into the Ross Dress for Less store, she made the mistake of clicking her time card, and the store blew up. Now, you need to understand that methane, the lower explosive limit is 5%, higher explosive limit 15%. So if you have a fuel-air mixture between 5 and 15% methane, the rest air, and you have a decent spark, it blows up. So that's what happened there. And when the fire department came out, basically the streets were burning,
Yeah.
the planters were burning,
Parking lot was on
the
fire.
parking lot was on fire because the gas was feeding out from underground, and everything was just burning.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of that well. I knew it. My friend of mine was one of the principal investigators on that incident, and they made them do things to try and keep the water table farther down, and then they had to reseal the well so that the streets wouldn't burn anymore.
Well, let me interject here. I have been over to the Los Angeles County Museum, which is very close to there, and seen tar running out onto the street from underground. So this is
It's near the Little Brea tar pits.
Yes.
Well, that's also near the Salt Lake oil field. What they've had to do on the subterranean garages and the buildings all through that area is put oil separators in the garages so that when they pump water out that seeps into the garages, it has to go through an oil separator before they can dump the water into the storm drain. Otherwise, you end up with oil coming out on the beaches from it.
Right.
Now, these
You might have fires in the storm drains as well.
Oh, they could blow up too. So this is a real problem down there because we have people living in oil fields with toxic vapors that are causing cancer and brain damage and people getting sick from it. Mm-hmm. The body can only take so much assault from these kind of chemicals before very bad things happen to your body, like cancer, brain damage, rare blood ailments, flu-like symptoms. There's a whole collection of symptoms that go along with oil field poisoning, which are generally mistaken for having allergies. The dry throat, the dry unproductive cough, achy muscles, flu-like symptoms. Women have problem with their menstrual cycles and their hormones. By the time you get brain cancer and rare blood ailments and brain damage to the point where I've seen young women having to lean against doorways because they don't have enough balance to stand up anymore. But, it starts as something kind of mild and then progresses into more serious symptomology. You can handle driving a car because they're clean. Mm-hmm. But this is just the raw chemicals leaking out everywhere into our environment, which is extremely hazardous. And everybody's trying to look the other way and get somebody else to take care of it and not recognize what the problem is. There's been other, each oil field is quite a bit different than another one. So each one has to be studied what disaster they're doing there individually. But basically, my advice to anybody listening to this is visit the Dogger website, DOGGR, look at the maps, and don't live near an old oil field. They all leak.